Mitro, Namaskar. I wish to welcome our distinguished chief guest, Ambassador Lakshmi Puri, former Assistant Secretary General of United Nations and the former Deputy Executive Director of UN Women. A very good evening to you, ma'am. Dr. Vijay Kelkar, our Vice President, has connected from Bangalore. Hello, Dr. Kelkar.
Yeah, I can. Can you hear me?
A very warm welcome to our President, Dr. Raghunath Mashelkar. Ms. Anu Agha, Ms. Vandana Chavan, and our esteemed trustees, members, and distinguished audience. I shall keep this very short as we have a very power-packed program at this book launch. I just want to say that Pune International Center has grown from strength to strength in these 14 years. The book that we are launching today, Nari Shakti, Indian Women Take Center Stage, is PIC's fourth book in 4 years. The fifth book is in the pipeline, and all of this is thanks to Dr. Kelkar. So as director of PIC for the last 4 years, I have seen something very interesting. Whether it is our governing council meetings every quarter, our annual general body meeting, or our weekly review meeting with Dr. Kelkar, the issue of gender sensitivity at PIC has come up again and again. How do we increase the participation of women in our programs, in our roundtables and in our conferences? How do we promote gender balance within PIC and in our recruitment of staff, interns, and research scholars? This has been a constant refrain in the discussions that we've been having. Just this morning, we had the 8th Dilip Padgaonkar Memorial Lecture by the eminent journalist Ms. Neerja Chaudhary. She spoke of changing India, rising aspirations of women, and the growing assertiveness of women when it comes to casting their valuable vote during elections. The impact of women's vote in the just concluded Maharashtra elections was discussed this morning. On September 24th last year, at the PIC Foundation Day, our Foundation Day lecture was delivered by Ms. Arundhati Bhattacharya, who created history by becoming the first lady to head the 200-year-old State Bank of India, India's biggest bank. In fact, Ms. Bhattacharya has an essay in the book which we are going to launch today, and you will hear more of this in just a matter of time. Last week at our 12th National Conference on Social Innovation, we released a research paper on strengthening women entrepreneurs. And 2 of our regular programs, PIC Adda and Pune Samvad, are planned and conducted by our esteemed members, Dr. Sangeeta Kale and Ms. Swati Raje, who are high achievers in their own right. What I wish to point out is, yes, PIC walks the talk on strengthening women's empowerment, and it has been doing so right from the beginning. Latest in this initiative is this book that is being released today. On this inspiring note, I wish to hand over the floor to our President, Dr. Raghunath Mashelkar. Over to you, sir.
Respected Ambassador Lakshmi Puri ji, we are sorry you could not join us physically. We are very much looking forward to welcoming you, but I understand the challenge that you had with health, and despite that, you are joining us. We are very, very grateful to you. Dr. Vijay Kelkar, our beloved Vice President, my favorite Anu Agha, my favorite Vandana Chavan, my favorite Uma and Ganesh, without whom we would not be here, distinguished members of PIC, ladies and gentlemen. It's a very unusual day today. We had two great programs on a single day, which never happens. And the first program in the morning was the 8th Dilip Padgaonkar Memorial Oration. And Nirja Chaudhary, uh, I don't have to introduce her. She is a fearless journalist, a political commentator. Many of you must have read her book, How PMs Decide, the best selling book. She gave the talk, and it's interesting that the very first Chameli Devi Jain award she won in 1981, and that award was for female journalists who came to the center stage. It was rather interesting that 43 years ago, somebody had the wisdom to start such an award for female journalists to come to the center stage. This book is all about getting women on the center stage, Nari Shakti. It's an interesting coincidence that in her address, Nirja Chaudhary said, it is Indian women who will be at the center stage in the 21st century. So we have done a good beginning to the day, I would say, and we are carrying this message forward. And we are releasing this fourth book in 3 years. I'm very proud. As Abhay said, all credit to Dr. Vijay Kelkar for inspiring us to sort of do that. First and foremost, I want to thank Uma and Ganesh for not only editing the book, but also conceptualizing it, and then their amazing purposeful perseverance with amazing passion, their amazing chasing of the authors to meet the deadlines, and finally getting this book. It's not an easy task, by the way, and they have done it. So big round of applause for both Uma and Ganesh. This book underscores the significance of women's participation in the economic growth of the nation and the pathways to achieve it. And I would mention just a couple of personal anecdotes. I remember I was the president of Indian Science Congress in the year 2000 when we were beginning new millennium, and I had talked about these new Panchashil for the new millennium: child-centered education, woman-centered family, human-centered development, knowledge-centered society, and innovation-centered India. And I had said there that 21st century India cannot run on one leg, cannot stand on one leg. It has to run on two legs so that 21st century becomes the India's century. I remember, I want to make a contrast. Anu, in 1991, which is 9 plus 24, 33 years ago, I was in China because we had bid for a World Bank contract, okay, which we won, by the way. And this was for reforming two research organizations, one in Nanjing, one in Suzhou. And I remember we visited a chemical plant, ethylene oxide they were producing. I went to the control room. There were 11 operators, computer operators and so on. All 11 of them were women, 33 years ago. And I came down, I was getting into my car and saw two women digging the road. High skill, low skill, it didn't matter. They were contributing. So I think the data are really striking if you just see what China did and what we did in terms of women empowerment. And I was just looking at some data because I had to speak and you have to always see something new. So I looked at data. In 2023, China's female labor force participation was 60.54% as against ours, which is 37%. And also their economic contribution. For example, 2023, our participation was 37% as against China's 60.5%. But the contribution to GDP In our case, it was 17% and theirs was 41%. So they must have done something right, so as to say. And I was looking at the data in more detail and found Vietnam, it is 70%, by the way, the highest, higher than the world average. We are lower than the world average. So I think there are lots of lessons that we have to learn on our potential is here and we are here. How do we reach it? I also looked at some other economists making predictions. And one prediction that came from World Bank was that if our women participation were to reach 50%, our GDP growth rate could go up by 1.5%. And Christine Lagarde, the IMMD, said that it's a no-brainer if India's GDP would be 30% higher if participation by women. So there is no case to be made. I think the book is all about, we all know the potential, how to reach the potential. We are way below. And the book is all about that, by the way. The book is all about that. It's not mere statistics. And every possible way how women can make sort of a difference. The last anecdotal point I want to make is that I was a chancellor of Assam University. And I remember we had the convocation. There were 19 awards and medals, Anu. Can you believe it? All 19, without exception, were won by girls. What happens to them afterwards? So I want to correct my equation when I say education equal to future, because girls are doing higher studies, as you can say, it's an opportunity. How to convert it into education plus opportunity is equal to future. How do we create that opportunity? The book is all about that, the pathways to success. So I want to thank all the authors, because the book is what it is because of the authors. The book is what it is because of Uma and Ganesh. And this is a very, very special day for us for conveying this big message that India of the 21st century has to run on two legs. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Dr. Mashelkar. Now it's time for our book launch. It is our honor to warmly welcome our chief guest for today, Ambassador Lakshmi Puri, a distinguished diplomat and advocate for gender equality. Ambassador Puri has served as the Assistant Secretary General of the United Nations and the Deputy Executive Director of UN Women, where she championed women's rights and sustainable development on a global scale. After her BA Honours in History from University of Delhi and Masters from Punjab University, she joined the Indian Foreign Service in 1974. With a career spanning over 3 decades in international relations, Ambassador Puri has made significant contributions to promoting gender-related issues, including economic empowerment and the fight against violence towards women. Her recent debut novel, Swallowing the Sun, reflects her deep commitment to these causes, drawing inspiration from her family's legacy and India's freedom struggle. Prior to her 15-year stint at the United Nations, she served as the Indian diplomat for 28 years, and from 1999 to 2002, she was India's ambassador to Hungary, concurrently accredited to Bosnia and Herzegovina. Ambassador Puri has been deeply influenced by her parents, her mother, Malti, a fierce feminist and amongst the first postgraduates in Maharashtra, and her father, the Kannada literature Balkrishna Murudeshwar. Ambassador Murthy credits her parents with inculcating her with ideals of gender equality and freedom of expression. Ambassador Puri was also active in negotiating India's economic diplomacy initiatives such as the Look East Policy, Indo-Asian Dialogue Partnership, Indian Ocean Rim Association, and BIMSTEC. She is the recipient of the Eleanor Roosevelt Award for Human Rights in 2016, Novus Award for Championing the Sustainable Development Goals, and the Millennium Campus Award 2015. She contributed significantly in ensuring that a specific gender equality and women's empowerment goal was adopted as part of the Sustainable Development Goals. I invite Ambassador Puri for the ceremonial release of the book Nari Shakti, Indian women take center stage. Ma'am, over to you.
I officially am very glad to officially release the book Nari Shakti by the PIC. And I wish I could have been there physically, but an unexpected accident prevented me from doing that. And I congratulate all the authors, the editor, and the PIC on this book. Dr. Raghunath Mashelkar ji, Dr. Vijay Kelkar ji, and friends. I'm so honored to be part of PIC's launching of this excellent book on Nari Shakti in three capacities and not necessarily in this order. As a former Assistant Secretary General of the UN and a global advocate for gender equality and women's empowerment, who had the privilege of leading world's first organization to promote gender equality and women's empowerment for 7 foundational years. Secondly, as the daughter of a feminist Nari Shakti advocating and practicing Maharashtrian parents, whose life and vision I celebrate in my novel Swallowing the Sun, which is very much reflective of that spirit. And of course, as the niece of two very eminent Punekars, P.R. Damle, Professor P.R. Damle, who was the principal of Wadia College, a great philosopher, and Kamilini Damle, who also inspired characters in my novel. Now, Pune, as the karma bhumi of freedom fighters and social reformers, such as Lokmanya Tilak, Gopal Krishna Gokhale, and Maharshi Karve, not to forget, is a historic city and all the more relevant and appropriate in the context of our book launch event today. Because Mahatma Jyotiba Phule and Savitribai Phule pioneered the education of the girl child in India, and Maharshi Karve set up the Sri Shikshan Sansthan in this very city. Many of my characters who embody Muktabai's ants that dare to fly into the sky and swallow the sun to try to attain the seemingly impossible and unattainable. There are many characters like that. Ambutai, a widow in my novel, reinvents her life with help from the Sri Shikshan Sansthan in Pune. And later, Veena, another character escaping an unwanted marriage, teaches in Pune before becoming a successful film star in Mumbai. All the other women characters, whether it is Malti, modeled after my mother, or Sarla, epitomize Nari Shakti in this historical novel, family saga, epic love story, coming of age tale against the backdrop of India's epical freedom struggle that is the Swallowing the Sun. And also it's about the sheroes at that time as much as the heroes. The men characters too are what we in UN Women used to call he for she. Those who stand up for and champion the rights of women. I also show that women can do and be anyone they want. The sky is not the limit. They break all patriarchal boundaries and defy gender roles, including as freedom fighters and those as lawyers defending them. From that crusade, barely 100 years before our independence to today, 77 years after independence, India and Indian women, as this book brings out, have indeed come a long way. Nari Shakti can be seen in the stellar achievements of women in all fields, from literature, education, social reform, to leadership in industry, space and defense technology, science, IT, biotechnology, bureaucracy and politics, and the economy. And that's very important, the economy. Women are the backbone of our homes and our families, and we draw immense strength from our families as a civilizational value that still subsists, thankfully. Now, the Pune International Center has done commendable work with this book. And I wish to congratulate Dr. Mashelkar, Dr. Kilkar, the editors, Uma Ganesh and Ganesh Natarajan, and the eminent contributors for comprehensively putting together various facets and dimensions on the need for greater empowerment of women, tracing the roots of gendered thinking from ancient times, globally and in India, and to the present time and into the future. I was very happy to note that the Nari Shakti book is dedicated to the mothers of India, but it equally makes a case, a compelling one, for not limiting it to what has traditionally been considered a Matri Shakti based primeval and sacred role, but also to welcome her in her incarnations as a space scientist, to CEO of companies, to leaders in the armed forces and the legislative, judicial, and executive parts of government, to climate warriors and change makers. So women's place is every place. Just give her a chance, it seems to argue and prove this book on Nari Shakti by PIC. The 11 essays in this book make us think multisectorally and yet holistically on the why, what, and how of achieving gender equality and women's empowerment around the world, but with a focus on India. What actions have been taken, remain to be taken, where we are, and where we need to go. It is a valuable contribution to this vital cause. What I always call, it's not only an Indian national public good, but it is a vital global public good when you achieve gender equality and women's empowerment. From my UN Women lens, I would like to flag the Pancha Tattvas, what I call the Pancha Tattvas of action for achieving gender equality and women's empowerment. First of them is convening all actors and stakeholders from governments, institutions to civil societies, especially women's movement at all levels. And we have a glorious tradition, including in Pune, of a very vibrant women's movement, self-help groups and everything around that. And it has to be global to local and vice versa. Secondly, setting norms and standards, laws and policies at all levels, adopting constitution, gender equal constitutions at all levels. And then one thing, I was going through the book and I feel that we should perhaps delve deeper into SDG 5, the role of the transformation in global norm setting with the adoption of a dedicated goal, SDG 5, which I was very privileged to play a part in making sure is part of Agenda 2030. And it's a goal on achieving gender equality and the empowerment of all women and girls. And I want to emphasize that because that's also about intersectionality, about leaving no one behind, no girl or woman behind. So that is a very important part. We now, in my estimation, have the highest standard, what I call a global gender compact. And this is something that needs to be now downloaded to the regional levels, in our regional organization formations, and we need to download it to the national to the state levels in the case of India, and also local levels, because that's where the rubber hits the ground, and also the realities of women have to be changed. The gender specific, gender responsive data. This is, about making women count. It's about knowledge. It's about monitoring and evaluation. So that is the other tattva. And then the advocacy and movement building, making gender equality and women's empowerment Jan Andolan, needed for social, and this is really needed because it's about creating a new norm. So you need this for bringing about social and cultural norm change and addressing political contestation. I have found even in my 7 years and thereafter that this is one of the most politically and culturally contested global public goods to deliver. Then we have to have lighthouse programs and policies on the ground that provide proof of concept and proof of impact, so that these can be replicated, scaled up, and become realities everywhere and really make for change and transformation. Then there are the 5 Panchatatvas of gender equality and women's empowerment issue areas. And they have been set out not only the Global Gender Compact, which covers all sectors and all areas, but also in the book on Nari Shakti of PIC. First is economic, financial, technological empowerment. Access, including access, ownership, and control over resources, autonomy, jobs, entrepreneurship. The second is political voice, participation, and leadership at all levels in all sectors. Ending all forms of violence against women. And then there are the 4 P's of prevention, of protection, persecution of perpetrators, and provision of critical response services to violence. So then there is the issue of ensuring sexual and reproductive health and access to services. And 5th is education and training and skills. So I'm happy to see that the book has attempted to cover these tattvas extensively and in some cases intensively. This is especially important as Prime Minister Modi has transformed the landscape, if not the mindscape, and gender mainstreamed the narrative of Sabka Saath, Sabka Vikas, Sabka Prayas, Sabka Vishwas, so completely and inextricably through his advocacy campaigns, Beti Bachao, Beti Padhao, and now it is Beti Kamao, and narrative setting for behavior change on valuing the girl child. We have this problem of boy preference and girl aversion, and empowering her through his bold legislative initiatives like Women's Reservation Act on parliamentary representation, his transversal and targeted socio-economic welfare, education, nutrition, health, and empowerment programs for women and girls, and his promotion of women's leadership in sunrise and frontier sectors and technologies. So he's moved from anchoring India's sustainable development in women-centered development to women-led development, establishing a new role model for the world in implementing the policies and programs that will enable India to achieve the 9 targets of SDG 5. And with 1/6 of the world's women, India is a microcosm of the world that can lead not only this country into the dawn of realizing the most important project for humanity in the 21st century, but without India achieving this, the world will not achieve. So at the G20 New Delhi summit, Indian presidency identified women-led development as a priority theme and consecrated into the mandate and constitution of this grouping of 20 most powerful economies and countries for global economic and financial governance, and targets and programs were set. An institutional mechanism was established to mainstream now systematically gender equality into everything it does in global norm setting and action, but also national action by these countries, and also setting peer group examples. So, this is a singular and consequential contribution of India to the global gender equality and women's empowerment mission. Anu Agha says in her foreword that women face four major hurdles throughout life, right from the internal struggle of a girl child with the messaging she received since childhood. Agha brings us to the hard ground by pointing to the number of injustices and biases against women in our society and our nation. And Mashelkar ji referred to, how in the indices we are still not where we should be, given also our civilizational value of deifying women. This is the only civilization in a continuous way till today. We say yatra naryastu ramante tatra yatra naryastu pujante ramante tatra devata, and we deify. We talk about Saraswati, girls as Saraswati and Lakshmi and Parvati and Shakti. So the very concept of Shakti, the concept of Ardhanarishwar, all these are really civilizational, nuggets that we have to offer to the world. So we should be really now in the highest of echelons of gender equality. So India will shine brightly only when we unshackle our Nari Shakti and unleash that power. The time is right because we are in the Amrit Kal as a confident and aspirational nation on the way to our destiny as a Vikasit Bharat by 2047. And gender equality and women's empowerment is both morally and ethically the right thing to do, and we all know that. But it is also the essential and smart thing to do to reach that destination. And of course, we must not rest on the oars of our achievement so far, but try Bhagirath like to furiously and rapidly propel ourselves to becoming the Dhruv Tara of gender equality and women's empowerment for the rest of the world, a Vishwa Guru in that area of guiding, especially the global South and other democracies. And you cannot have a democracy, true democracy, unless the half of your population is equally empowered. So, as the largest democracy, and then we have to set the standard from the scale, speed, the audacity of change and effort, and replicability of our success in this prodigious effort. I wish to end by once again congratulating Pune International Center for gender mainstreaming, their think tanking, of which this book on Nari Shakti is a stellar example. I encourage them to continue on this path. So this mission, often seen as a surreal aspiration akin to and swallowing the sun, becomes a mission possible. And I want to end with Tilak's, M.B. Tilak's poem, the last 4 lines, if I may, because it's so relevant. मी ईश्वरांच्या जगत्कारणाच्या स्वरी हे तुती पूर्णता मंगल बोला हवे ते मला काय त्याचे पुरे जाणतो मीच माझे बळ. So am I not complete and auspicious? The purpose of God's creation felicitous. It matters not to me what is your opinion. I well know my own strength, my dominion. Thank you.
Thank you, Ambassador Puri, for this inspiring address. I would like to take a moment to acknowledge all the incredible individuals whose contributions have enriched the book we are celebrating today. Our esteemed chapter contributors, Dr. Mashelkar, Dr. Vijay Kerkar, Dr. Ajit Ranade, Ms. Arundhati Bhattacharya, Dr. Ejaz Ghani, Mr. Prashant Girbane, Ms. Vandana Chavan, Ms. Ika Chaturvedii, Ms. Safina Hussain, Ms. Sushma Rajagopalan, Dr. Anil Gupta, Ms. Pooja Goel, Mr. Abhay Vedya, and Ms. Gunjan Bhojwani. As segment contributors, Mr. Dinanath Kolkar, Ms. Anamika De, Ms. Maridula Sang, Mridula, Ms. Anushri Alva, Ms. Mrinal Gharpure, Ms. Priya Patil, and Ms. Nikki Barua. Finally, our exceptional editors, Dr. Uma Ganesh and Dr. Ganesh Natarajan, whose meticulous work and expertise have been instrumental in refining the manuscript into its polished and final form that we see today. Now, I request Dr. Mashelkar to come up on stage along with our panelists for today's panel discussion, Ms. Anu Agha, Ms. Ika Chaturvedii, Dr. Ranade, Ms. Vandana Chavan, Dr. Ganesh Natarajan, and I also request other contributors of the book to come up on stage for a physical book launch. I now invite Dr. Uma Ganesh to share her insights about the book and initiate the panel discussion. To introduce ma'am, Dr. Uma Ganesh is an MBA from the Faculty of Management Studies, New Delhi, and PhD from IIT Bombay, with 3 decades of success in corporate and entrepreneurial ventures covering manufacturing, media, banking, education, and information technology. Dr. Ganesh has built expertise in entrepreneurial strategy, skill development, and digital employee management platforms. Her entrepreneurial venture, Global Talent Track, attracted investment by Intel Capital, Cisco, and Helion Ventures. This venture is one of the leading vocational skills company that uses the blended learning model and acts as a bridge between academia and the industry. GTT and its digital platform Skills Alpha have so far impacted 1.2 million youth in the country. GTT Data Solutions Limited has been listed on the Bombay Stock Exchange last month and is set to scale new heights. Dr. Uma has also co-founded 5F World and co-authored 2 books on knowledge management and digital success. She has been an elected member of the National Council of the Confederation of Indian Industry and chair of NHRD Pune. I invite ma'am to please share her insights.
Okay, thank you all for coming here today for this book launch ceremony. The efforts over the last year or so has culminated into this day when we are able to see the book. But the primary inspiration for writing this book and the motivation actually came from 2 stalwarts. One of them is very much here, Professor Mashelkar, and Professor Kelkar. So you are really the two people who inspired us to do all this work, and so delighted to see the outcome today. And thank you very much, Ambassador Puri, for your stellar talk. And there are many, many vignettes that we can take away from that talk, which again has been very inspiring. Now, talking about the book itself, you would get to see that there are different authors who have brought in different perspectives. And when we started actually writing, or rather conceptualizing the book, we took almost 3-4 months trying to figure out what should be the focus of this book, because this subject of women, status of women in India, has got many contours. And it was quite a challenging task to think through, and we exchanged. We had several exchanges with Professor Mashelkar, with Professor Kelkar, amongst ourselves. Ganesh and I, we debated quite a lot. And finally, we came to this conclusion that Nari Shakti, why is it important, is because of a purpose. And that immediate purpose is, I mean, it has got many reasons why Nari Shakti can be unleashed or should be unleashed. But the immediate purpose is, after writing the book, India's Pathways, we had this in the background, in the back of our minds, that if we have to move towards this goal of India becoming a $10 trillion economy by 2030, what is the role that Nari Shakti can play? So keeping that as a focus, we have tried to explore different dimensions. And each of these dimensions are peppered with some statistics, research, insights, experiences, anecdotes, which I hope you will find it useful. What are those vignettes? I'd like to just highlight. If we talk about the right to education for the girl child in India, we are indeed very proud of the fact that we have an act in place. But even today, we have at least 16% dropout, to say the least. If we talk about the gross enrollment ratio, that is the male enroll ratio, female enrollment ratio in the universities, we have come a long way, and it is almost equal. And if you look at STEM education, again, women are actually one step ahead. Professor Mashelkar alluded to that, about 29% versus 27% for the males. But if you look at the percentage of female after graduating from STEM education, only 14% actually are productively occupied or employed. Similarly, when you look at the women in workforce, it is a matter of great concern that the rate of women participation has dropped and has been dropping consistently from 30% 10 years ago to about 19% currently in the formal sector. And then when we talk about women participation in the technology sector, yes, 36%, the statistics looks great. But if you look at the number of women who enter into the workforce, fantastic, 51% of the industry comprises of 51% women. But down the line, if you look at the managers, women managers in the workforce, it is only 25%. And finally, when you look at the leaders at the CXO level, it is just 1%. On the other hand, if you look at the number of SHGs, this country has added the self-help groups. It has been a phenomenal movement. We have 100 million women as part of the SHGs, about 9 million SHGs. But if you look at the average income that they are able to generate, it's between 1,000 to 2,000 rupees per month. And the government of India has set up a fairly, you can say, aggressive target of 1 lakh rupees per annum per woman from SHGs. So this is another question which is there in front of us. And I would like to touch upon one more dimension before I open the forum for our speakers here. And that is to do with entrepreneurship. Today, when we are talking about entrepreneurship, there are many, many avenues, there are funds available, schemes available, but we find that only 6% of the entrepreneurs, they are women, and that too as co-founders. And only about 1.5% of these enterprises are fully women-owned. So you see, in every one of these dimensions which are capable of generating income, adding to the GDP of the country, we have a lot of work to do and a lot of thinking to be done. So on that note, what is it that some of the corporates have done, and what is it that can be done to motivate women to be part of the corporate sector or to remain employed? I would like to first of all invite Anu, who has written the foreword, and there can't be any better person than Anu, who has not only been the member of parliament, but also has explored the corporate dimension, the not-for-profit foundation, and really cares for the womanhood. Anu.
Ambassador Lakshmi Puri, Dr. Mashelkar, Dr. Kelkar, and my dear friends. Congratulations to PIC for the launch of Nari Shakti, which deals with challenges that the women faces. As I've written in my foreword, there are two major hurdles a woman has to face. First is a personal script, which is formed by the messages a girl child receives in her growing up years. Besides the family, she could be influenced by the media, the movie, and the books. The second hurdle is the external limitations a woman has to face. For example, bias in the corporate world in hiring women, even if she's extremely competent, and when employed, not being fair and giving her senior positions. Some people believe these differences exist because of nature, but I believe the differences exist because of nurturance, which means the messages she receives in her childhood. It's okay. Thank you. Even in 2004, many family business located in metropolitan cities in the and the patriarch having studied abroad do not encourage their daughters to join the family business. We often hear of companies being called Natarajan and Sons, Mashelkar and Sons. But have you ever heard a company called Mukherjee's and Daughters? That's not a corporate. When I was growing up, my father had a small manufacturing business. I have two brothers older than me, and they were constantly reminded that they would have to join the family business. Though academically I did better than my brothers, the constant message I received was to marry and have children. Not seeing any women in business, when I was young, I assumed business is meant only for men. When my husband suddenly expired, the board insisted that I should take over the role of executive chair of Thermex. I was not at all comfortable with assuming this responsibility and kept devaluing myself by telling myself I was not worthy nor competent to take on this role. I'm not an engineer, I'm terrible at finance. How could I take up this role? I kept comparing myself with my charismatic husband and felt very small and inadequate. I assumed this role was given to me because of our majority shareholding. I wonder if a man was given this position overnight, would he go through the same questions? 8 months after I became the executive chair, I went for Vipassana. Since rules do not permit you to talk, read, or distract yourself for 10 days, you go inwards. I got in touch with my inner strength and realized the futility of constantly comparing myself with my husband. What I was expected to do was give out my best. I realized an apple tree cannot give oranges, so I can never be like my husband. Vipassana helped me to draw on my inner self and my self confidence. I wish every woman in the audience learns to tap her inner strength. I wish the book Nari Shakti all success.
Thank you very much, Anu, for that scintillating start. Now I'm going to turn to Ika, who has been researching a lot on Indian mythologies and the wonderful past. And she's trying to put that to use after her very successful corporate career in a new venture that she set up recently. And she's training the minds in the corporates to think of women from a very different perspective, particularly drawing lessons from mythologies. So my question to you, Eka, is, in India, we're all grown up with mythologies, and we see several female deities around us. We worship them, and we know what Kali stands for, and so on and so forth. Despite this, what is the reason that you have decided to focus upon the female deities and try to educate, or rather, we are already educated? Are you trying to, what is it that you're trying to get them to think about? Your views.
Thank you so much. Thank you so much, Uma. And first of all, I can't even begin to express my gratitude to Ganesh and to Uma and to Pune International Center. And thank you, Dr. Mashelkar. Thank you, Dr. Kelkar. It's just such a privilege and such an honor to be a part of an anthology like this. Ambassador Puri, I'm going to start from where you left off, and Anu from where you left off. The reason that we go back into our mythology is that the fact is, and mythology is a very misleading term, but the fact is that we are products, whether it's men, women, but we as Indians, we as Bharatiyas, we as humans are products of not just two parents or four grandparents. We carry within ourselves our civilizational DNA. We carry within ourselves our blood memory. And our mythologies, our ancient wisdom, our scriptures are a very good place to tap into our roots, to say who we really are within. So Anu, when you share the fact of your anxiety when you were asked to become the chairman of the board, it is a very human anxiety. It's not a gender anxiety. But as women, we are forced, we're not forced, we are nurtured, like you said, the messages that we receive. We are nurtured to seek external validation. But when we go deep within ourselves, and that's what I've sort of traced out in the chapter as well, and Ambassador Puri referred to it, in our civilizational context, we have a very strong gender identity. Our women are not damsels in distress for the need to be rescued by a shining armor, knight in shining armor. There is gender equality in terms of participation, and Ambassador Puri spoke about it, whether it's in our social lives, whether it's in our work lives, whether it's in our political structures, whether it's in across all our structures, right? And therefore, what we are talking about is our need to tap into our inner strengths, to tap into our civilizational DNA, our blood memory, and draw from there. In terms of gender roles, we have always had women leaders, and not just in India, but this part of the world. So we are gender agnostic to the idea of leadership. We in India we are the world's largest living cult that celebrates the feminine goddess. We have 18 days in a year where we do nothing, exclusively nothing, but celebrate the feminine divine within us. And it's not just women who celebrate, it's men, women. We do it agnostic of our race, of our region, of our community, of our gender, of our age. And therefore, and by the way, including leadership, so whether it starts from celebrating children at across ages, or whether it's width of sectors or it's depth of age or race or relationship, the fact is that we have it within us, we would be very well served, especially in, as Ambassador Puri spoke about, this whole Viksit Bharat and the Amrit Kal, to actually dig deep into our civilizational roots and pull out from there the gender roles that we occupy, pull out from there the gender strength that we possess, and indeed draw upon our Shakti and the power, both for men and for women. And that's what we've written here. Does that help?
Thank you very much, Ika. Thank you very much. Yes, I mean, there is that inner belief or self belief and the Shakti that you have talked about. Some of us are very privileged to have that come to us naturally, also because of the ecosystem that we have around us. And I have been privileged to have that kind of inspiration because of my grandmother, who became a widow at the age of 26. And she lived to the ripe age of 109. And my parents who are here, they have been themselves role models, and my brothers have created that kind of ecosystem, one of whom is also present in the audience today. But not everybody is privileged to have that kind of an ecosystem. And therefore, we have some of the governments, state governments in India coming forward to somehow get those women to believe that they can earn, and they are being supported with number of schemes, whether it's the bus pass or whether it is some kind of a monetary support to get going, all of that. But this kind of womenomics, Ajit, I would like to come to you next to hear from you. Is that sustainable, or is that the only way that we are going to be able to get women to have some income in their hand? Or what else you think we should be doing in a very proactive manner to get more women into a stage where they will be able to earn incomes for themselves? What does your economic thought say?
Thank you, Uma. And first of all, again, want to congratulate Uma and Ganesh. They were the playing and non-playing captains, both of them, and especially playing captains. And this is, by the way, if I can say so, with permission from Uma, this is actually this Taskmaster's third book in a record time. So please give him a big applause. And thanks to, of course, Dr. Mashelkar and Dr. Kelkar, because this is actually, the book came out, you see, all three books have got its teamwork. There are several, you might be a little overwhelmed by the number of authors who are standing on the stage, but that's testimony to the captains who actually made it happen. So, and there's variety of and diversity of thought. So, Uma, about the economic aspect, so we've written along with Dr. Ijaz, we've written the chapter on the economics of women's participation. You made a mention, I think Dr. Ambassador Puri also made a mention of that. By the way, since Anu Agha mentioned Mukherjee and Sons, I'm reminded what Christine Lagarde, Ambassador Puri also mentioned in her wonderful keynote, by the way, thank you, Ambassador Puri. She mentioned Christine Lagarde, who was then the managing director of IMF, International Monetary Fund. She's now the president, or whatever it's called, chairman of the European Central Bank. But when she was managing director of IMF, we had the crash of the Lehman Brothers. So Christine Lagarde famously said, if it was Lehman Sisters instead of Lehman Brothers, it might not. This is a gold-plated bank of 150-year-old investment bank which just went kaput overnight. So, I mean, that was in a lighter vein. The thing is that about economics, I just want to give you a tidbit. See, I think it was mentioned, Uma said that it's down to it. The remarkable thing about India, and I'm talking about the Indian context, is that women's participation in the formal economy or formal labor force, or what is called paid work, actually was around 30 or 32% about 20 years ago. And then it went down. So I'm talking about the beginnings of India's liberalization and high growth phase. And from there it went down to almost 20 or 19 or 18% progressively. And it's remarkable because this was a time when India's economy was growing strongly, and therefore labor input and workforce participation rates overall were going up. So it's really a puzzle why during a phase when people were getting employed, maybe in the formal, in the registered, non-registered sector. So it's quite remarkable to note that. But then lately, in the last few years, actually, Government of India is working very closely with not just the data part, but also to understand and examine this phenomenon. And in the latest issue of Economist magazine, they also point out to the fact that there's been a surge. So the good news is that actually women's participation in the formal labor force in India, according to Government of India, and now you can of course be careful about it, but it's 40 plus. So it is going up quite remarkably. So we need to understand. And one of the reasons for that is because women's participation in the formal economy has not been documented or measured the way it is done internationally. So we are actually aligning ourselves with the global norms. For example, you go to a thele wala or a belpuri wala, and you say the question that the surveyor asks is, so who is working or who is doing the selling? So it's usually the man. But sometimes at the back of the, that informal whatever shop, the women or the children are cutting onions. So that is not only it's unpaid work, but you see it's creating economic value. So actually the value of the velpuri that you buy, 15 or 20 or 30 rupees, has input from the women, but it has never been counted. So you need very careful, clever questionnaires to capture this kind of work. There is of course a lot of unpaid work which we all know. But even in the sort of economic activity which is getting captured, it's not sufficiently was being attributed to women's inputs. So that is one way this thing has gone up. And of course, we are aligning our measurement methods to the global practices on this. But you also have to remember that the fact that women's participation in India has gone down has both supply and demand factors. And there are both social, economic, cultural factors as well. So that is what we have written about in this chapter. To give you a very trivial example, in 2016, we passed a landmark law. We thought that women, to encourage more women in the workplace, we have to give them support from the law. We passed a law called the maternity leave law, which said that all women have to be given, is it 6 months, so 24 weeks, is it, or 6 months of paid leave. So this is to enable her to deal with maternity and come back. Guess what happened? What do you think was the consequence of this law? The employment rate of women went down, not up. Now why is that? Because the employer said, hey, wait a minute, I have to deal with this, so I might as well. So the law which had supposedly intended to promote women's work participation ended up having a perverse impact. So sometimes you have to really think this through. And also this cultural aspect, that I just will read this sentence from this chapter. The interplay of marriage and social customs might also have a decisive influence. It is quite common to hear a comment, and please take it, please indulge me. It's quite common to hear a comment such as, my daughter is in a temporary job, but as soon as she gets married, she'll quit. This is the marriage market. Abhi wo job kar rahi hai, lekin don't worry, she'll just quit when she gets married. It is as if a job is simply a temporary arrangement before marriage and motherhood. Indeed, and by the way, when this chapter was being written, Claudia Goldin won the Nobel Prize in Economics, and her entire body of work is about women's role in the economy and the evolution over the last 200 years, extensively documented and researched in the context of the US economy, but much of those lessons are applicable to other economies, including India. So Goldin's and other people's work has documented how in olden times, nearly 60% of an adult woman's prime working age was spent either in being pregnant or nursing a child. I mean, just look at our grandparents' generation, which tended to have people with a dozen siblings and so on, and imagine the plight of those mothers. So we've come a long way from those days, and I must say that I'm little uncomfortable with referring to women as Mataji and Behan, Meri Behan or Meri Beti. Surely they have a role beyond these. You can refer to a woman as a woman. She doesn't have to be a mother. She doesn't have to be a sister. You don't refer to a man as ye to hamare pitaji hai magara. So that is a deeply cultural construct, and perhaps I'm afraid it's peculiar to Indian society. So all these things, I just want to say that there are supply factors, there are demand factors, there are social factors, there are economic factors, and there are cultural factors. So we have to work on all these fronts to ensure women's participation in the economy, not just for paid work, but acknowledged work goes up. And I think that's going to be a very big factor. Also, lastly, about women's role in governance and in representative democracy. I mean, Abu is a good example, but we need many more. So, thank you.
Talk about next, which is women's participation in the legislative and the governance framework. Recently this elections took place in the US, and there are many reasons why somebody won and someone did not. And one of the interesting debate was around why is it that some of the so-called less developed countries, including some of the South Asian countries, Sri Lanka, Pakistan, India, Bangladesh, they've all had women as women in leadership positions, elected positions as prime ministers and so on. But in a country like the US, Mexico has had, but Germany has had, but not the US. So it brought home an interesting point. They said, look, in the US, it's the population, the general population is voting. Whereas in countries like India, it is the parties who are nominating, eventually, in a country like India, the prime minister. So, fine. Then I was thinking about it further. If we were to look at it from that perspective, even today, we have exceptions like Anu and, of course, Vandana. But how many women really come forward to participate in this legislative framework who are not really from political background, who do not have that kind of grooming at home? Very, very few. So, over to you, Vandana. I know you have been a very strong proponent of this 33% reservation for women, and you have been a very successful lawyer who has stood for the cause of women all along. But what are your thoughts on how do you think a legislative framework should look at for women as we go forward?
Let me at the outset congratulate you, Uma and Ganesh, for having come out with this wonderful book, Nari Shakti. Thanks to Dr. Mashelkar, Dr. Kelkar, and of course PIC for having pushed you all to get this book for us. I'm sure this is going to serve a lot of inspiration for a lot of women in different fields. We have been talking about corporate sector, the economics of women in high positions. Politics is certainly a field where we did not, say before 1992, we hardly saw any women. If you talk about local self-governments, there were times, let me talk about the Pune Municipal Corporation, there were times when we didn't have a single woman corporator representing us. So it was thanks to the 30% reservation. Earlier it was 30% only for Maharashtra, even before the 73rd and 74th Amendment ushered the 33% nationwide. Before that, of course, women never came into politics for several reasons. One, of course, because that fear in your mind that will people elect you to that position. And if you saw that it was only somebody's wife, somebody's sister, somebody's mother who would then be in politics and contesting elections. Not that the picture is much different even today. Even when the municipal, I'm talking about the municipal corporations because it's at that level where the 73rd and 74th Amendment really brought a watershed moment in our country, because it was for the first time that so many millions of women came into the decision-making process. And then, of course, for the first election, we saw that it was somebody's sister, somebody's mother, somebody's relative being fielded as a candidate. And it was very, very few of us who didn't have any political background who got into politics. And believe me, when I was first asked, will you stand for elections? Because the place where you stay, the ward has got reserved for women. My reaction was, no, that's not my piece of cake. So that is the reaction for women who are not having a background in politics. It is difficult because it's money power, it's muscle power, it's different chemistry. It's even today, it wouldn't be that the best meritorious person wins an election, because an election is considered on several considerations as to what caste you belong to, even subcaste you belong to. These are the kinds of considerations, unfortunately, which seep into the decision making of electing you. And therefore, it is still, even as of today, very difficult for a woman who does not have a political background to come into politics. And therefore, I feel that we have to educate the electorate That's number one. We have to instill confidence amongst people to lead leadership roles, which is not an easy thing to do because women shy away from coming forward. Anu being Anu said that she had anxiety about coming into that position. Imagine somebody wanting to come into politics where you have to contest an election, go around to people and ask for votes. And again, it's not a continuous process. So if I win, I'm not in that position forever or till I retire. I'm in that position only for 5 years. So even for me, I was a lawyer. I was practicing as a lawyer, doing very well, earning very well in spite of doing social service. When it came for elections and then I found out how much honorarium a corporator gets, then even my housemaid was being paid much more. So these are the considerations which have to be also taken into consideration. So the moment the honorarium for a corporator is increased, immediately there's hue and cry amongst the public. Why do they want this? Why does it need to be increased? But there are several things which I think we as a consciously need to consider and put into place. There has to be capacity building for elected representatives, because the one who gets elected for the first time doesn't know ABC of administration, has never ever stepped into that whatever body, local body, or it could be the Rajya Sabha, it could be the Lok Sabha, it could be the State Assembly. You're stepping there for the first time, and then to understand what is your role, to actually be there and start raising questions about people, it does take time. And therefore, I feel what needs to be done is firstly instill a lot of confidence amongst people, amongst women who want to play a leadership role, number one. Started from the school days where they understand what is democracy, what it means to address issues of the public. There are several issues which we are baned with. It could be senior citizens, it could be children, it could be environment issues, so many of them. So I think these are the issues also which need to be, they have to be made conscious about, they have to be nurtured to play a leadership role and definitely to take it on. I think we have a lot of challenges, and to have a good representation of women at the local self-government and the parliament, I think we have a lot of challenges to go ahead.
But thank you very much, Vandana. But we are so proud of the fact that Pune has given 2 successful women and who have been role models for many of us. Thank you very much. The last person who's going to speak today is going to be Ganesh, and I have this question for you, Ganesh. See, we are all talking about support that is required to be provided for women. Women can play a lead role, can make a difference. And therefore, particularly in the last 4-5 years, there has been quite a bit of focus on women-centric governance, women-led governance, and women to be supported by corporates and so on and so forth. But of late, we are seeing a very interesting trend. Suddenly, men are waking up and saying, particularly in the Western world and in the US in particular, why is it that women should be given prominence? Why is it that women should be given this kind of an attention? Why shouldn't meritocracy play the role? And we also saw, as a result of all of this and more, in the recent presidential elections in the US, one party focused significantly on men, and they spoke to the male segment, and you saw the results of it. And the result clearly indicated that there are men who are disenchanted with this whole process of supporting women, and they want to come back to the helm of affairs. So Ganesh, my concern arising out of this is, India has been following a lot of these trends, not just this trend, a lot of these trends to kind of inculcate and see what is it that we can do in this country. Do you think this trend will happen in India as well? Or what do you think will happen to the humanity as a whole in terms of this sort of a thinking process beginning to happen?
Thank you, Uma. I'll definitely address this. And by the way, there are 3 amazing things that have happened today which has never happened to me in 14 books and multiple years of lecturing. The first is, of course, the fact that the last speaker has enough time to speak, which is, as all of you will realize, has never happened in the history of seminars in this country. The second is we have a 92-year-old man in the audience and a 2-month-old baby in the audience, which for me is quite unique. The 2-month-old baby, by the way, is the daughter of our company secretary, Insia, and she insisted on bringing her baby along, which is fantastic. And of course, Uma's father, Mr. S.V. Iyer, who's all of 92 years old. So it's absolutely amazing. The third is, for me, it's very, very unusual that I have in this room my guru, Dr. Mashelkar, who inspires all of us ever since we moved to, Uma and I moved to Pune in 2001. I have my first boss who gave me my first break as an entrepreneur, Captain Vilas Katre, okay, who 1985 believed in me and said maybe I could run a company when I was all of 26 years old. And I have the person who enables me to run around 25 days a month, Dr. Pankaj Jindal, my orthopedic. Thank you very much, sir, for coming. So it's absolutely amazing. To answer Uma's question, when I look around this room and I kind of think about the last 21 years, 23 years we've been in Pune, and I cannot think of leaders that I admire more than the people in this room, and I'll answer the gender question with that. In 11 years of building this company, Global Talent Track, primarily Uma's work, which of course, as you heard, just went public on the Bombay Stock Exchange a month ago. We've had 3 amazing CEOs. Manjari Gokhale, whose father is here. Thank you, sir. Manjari, of course, is in the UK. Then we had Mridula Sankhayan, who's also here. She lives in Allahabad, but thank you very much, Mridula, for being here. And of course, Pallavi Patgaonkar, who has taken it all the way to listing on the Bombay Stock Exchange. Thank you, all of you, 3 of you. Then I think about the investment company and the consulting company we set up called 5F World, and Ipsita Nayak, who's our CEO, she's here. I'm thinking maybe I'll find a man at some point of time, but nevertheless. And then our first investee company from 5F World, which is an amazing Pune company from Tambatali called Studio Copper, which is run by 4 women. And Rashmi Ranade, thank you so much for being here. They do, if any of you have not seen Studio Copper products, their showroom and their factory and everything is just behind the JW Marriott, not far from here. Absolutely amazing stuff. And then I thought maybe I must find a man somewhere. So it's still not happening. So then I joined this entrepreneurial group called TAI. And of course, the first person I meet is Rashmi Ghosh, and she's also here in this room, along with her lovely daughter Aparna. And now, of course, it's a Bengali woman called Tamika, but all women who are kind of managing these amazing associations. Uma already mentioned our 2 most eminent members of parliament, Agha and Vandana Chavan, who are right here in this room. And last but not the least, in our own Rotary Club, okay, after struggling through multiple men who did a lousy job, we have Kiran Grewal, who's our president. So and of course, as you know, my biggest success story today is not GTT, not 5F World, nothing, but an entity called Lighthouse Communities Foundation, okay, which was started by Ruchi Mathur, who's right here, which is now run by Anuja Kishore and Amrita Bahulekar, who are both in this room. And it's again, till we fortunately found a CTO called Karthikeyan, and we imported him, was an all-woman team. Thank you for Karthi and Anu for being here. So it's actually amazing. So and of course, our communication agency for our entire public listing is Shauli Bose, who runs an amazing company called White Ideas Media, and I can keep going on and on. So I will find a man by the end of this 5-minute talk to support. But the answer to this question is, I mean, we have supported women throughout our life, and not because they are women, but because they turned out to be the most competent person here. The lady who's nodding her head, Geeta, all of you in MCCIA and PIC will know that men will come and go in MCCIA and PIC, but it's Geeta who runs it forever. So I think that's the strength you're seeing here. Why do I say this? I remember when I joined Zensar in 2001, it was all of 250 people, and 2 of my colleagues, Bala and Shauli, are both here from Zensar. And they'll both remember that when I joined Zensar, as would have been expected, only the financial controller was a woman, okay, Vaijayanti Deshpande. And I remember sitting around the table and saying, guys, what should we aspire for? And we had this very young woman who had just joined, Pramila Kalive. And Pramila told me that, look, by the time you finish with Zensar, at least 50% of our leadership should be women. And I'm really proud that 2016, when I retired from Zensar, 17 out of our 20 people in top management were women. Okay. And I think the phenomenal success story we had, especially in the last 6-7 years of my tenure, in terms of 44% per year market growth, was actually attributable to the sheer commitment of these people. And Pramila told me that, look, we more than exceeded our own expectation. And I remember we started a little group which was inspired by our first speaker, Lalita Gupte, who, by the way, is very much a Punekar. All of you remember Lalita Gupte was this legendary managing director of ICICI under Mr. Kamath. And she built this band of 4 amazing women who are all very, very strong leadership positions today. And Lalita was our first speaker in this group we set up for Women for Excellence. And she talked about multiple things that ICICI did to make it possible for women, not only supporting them towards, through the marriage and the maternity and everything else, but just making it very feasible, very welcoming for them to come back. And I think we implemented a lot of things. And I remember 2015, a lot of men came to me in private and said, look, can we now start a Men for Excellence group in Zensa? Because men are feeling very threatened that, look, these aggressive women are kind of taking over the planet. So to answer Uma's question, there is an issue. I'm sure all of you read about the US election, which she kind of alluded to, because the reality is that poor Kamala Harris focused very much on gender, very much on trans, very much on the other communities. And Trump went out with great guidance from his son and spoke on every young men's channel there was. Net result is super majority of the white men in America voted for Trump. And interestingly, a majority of Latin American men also voted for Trump. So when the rest of the genders are divided 50-50 between Trump and Kamala Harris, and you get 85% of the men voting for Trump, the outcome was obvious. So I think the point I make, and I have a very good friend from Harvard Business School. I had dinner with him in New York just about a month back. And he was telling me, Ganesh, do you know my problem? I'm this white American who is unable to get a board position in the city of New York, in spite of being part of Fitch Ratings and many of the other ones. He says, because everybody I go in and say that, look, we need a diversity candidate. That you have to be either a woman or a not too sure gender or whatever else that they have to. But think, a man who says I'm a white man is not going to get a chance. So it happens differently in politics and differently in the genders. So my point is very simple. And stemming from my Zensar experience and Aptech experience and recent experiences in Pune, I think the best person must win. And as Ajit rightly said, the minute we start categorizing men and women, breadwinners, caveman mentality, etc., you will automatically find that the best person will win. And whether that best person is a man who leads to, Dr. Mashelkar leads all of us. Ravi Pandit sitting here has built 2 amazing companies that we're all very proud of in Pune. And I can think of many others. But the fact of the matter is, I think that is what is going to be very, very critical for our success as a nation and probably as a society. As we all know, looking around the world and the kind of people that are being elected, there is cause for worry. That, look, can we ever revive the glorious democracies that we've all been so proud of? And that's something we'll have to see. And whether there are men or women who take it forward, we'll come and see. Let me just conclude by just giving you a sense of people who buy this book. Why did we choose these authors? You may think that this just came by mistake and dropped into our lap. Not like that. We actually invited people to write because of either their work with gender or what they strongly believe in as human beings. And I'll just read out from the list. Ajit Ranade you just heard, so I won't mention. Ijaz Ghani, who's of course the principal economist in the World Bank. He just retired. And he was my co-editor in the previous book we wrote for PIC. Ika, of course, you've heard, so I won't mention it. Pooja Sharma Goel. Pooja has been an entrepreneur twice over, sold her companies, and then was stabbed by Ashish Dhawan of Central Square Foundation. Today she runs a women's policy company for Ashish, and they're actually working with governments to make that happen. So she wrote an amazing chapter on what kind of policy work they're doing. Safina Hussain, who some of you may know, who's my hero, absolutely. Safina Hussain started a company called Educate Girls. And today, if you look at Educate Girls, they're not only the best funded NGO in this country, but doing absolutely amazing work among the tribal areas of Uttar Pradesh, Madhya Pradesh, Rajasthan, now Bihar, and taking it absolutely places. If I go down the line, Prashant Girbane, whom I think all of us know, because Prashant has both led PIC and the Maratha Chamber of Commerce with extreme distinction. So it's amazing that he and Gunjan have actually written a chapter on that. Dr. Anil Gupta is a friend of Dr. Mashelkar, a strong guru of mine and Uma's, who has worked on rural women's entrepreneurship around. And he and his amazing network of people in IIM Ahmedabad, called the Honeybee Network, have actually written this chapter on what does it take for women entrepreneurs to grow across the country. So you must read that chapter. It's actually amazing. He writes about sustainability and what women are doing in that area. Then, of course, Dr. Mashelkar himself and Dr. Kelkar, Vandana, who wrote this this policy piece in the last chapter. Deena, as many of you know Deena, who is now working with the Maratha Chamber, but has been a TCS veteran and has been participant in many of the women's initiatives that TCS has actually done in the past. Anushri Alva, who again runs a very, very interesting foundation which works with women. My own colleagues in Lighthouse, Mrinal Gharpure and Priya Patil, who are both running different initiatives, one for women's entrepreneurship called Junoon, and the other one working on a concept which is called Million Jugnus, which is to create 1 million young people in this country who can take on and shape the world. So I think that's something that we're very proud of. Then, of course, Mridula, whom I mentioned, and Mridula actually is written based on her own experiences in her company on really making women leaders more successful. Abhay, of course, who's what is a part of everything good that we've done in PIC. Nikki Barua, who's a very interesting, she's a Assamese girl turned entrepreneur in the US, runs an amazing initiative called Beyond Barriers, very close friend of mine and Uma's. And Nikki came in and said that, look, let me write about what does it take for international women to cross barriers. And that's the work that she and her partner, who's a Mexican woman, are actually doing together in New York. So it's actually quite amazing what they do. Animika Day, of course, who's also a professor and part of the Honeybee Network, and multiple volunteers of the Honeybee Network, including people in Pune, who have actually contributed. So as I think Ambassador Puri rightly said, I think the agenda is not so much should it be done for women, but what Dr. Mashelkar and Ambassador Puri said, let's make it happen. I mean, if we have to create a million fireflies in this country, we're going to rise up and stand for gender equality. Hopefully, Nari Shakti, hopefully the presence of all of you, and hopefully I think everybody who supports this cause will make it successful for India. So first of all, thank you very much. And finally, good night and thanks for being here. We're all here still. Last.
Thank you, panelists. Dr. Natarajan, you mentioned all the amazing women that have contributed to the book and all the ladies here tonight who've done exceptional work in their field. I'm sure the book will encourage many more. And I know most of you are waiting to go through the book and interact with the authors, but I'll just take a moment to say on behalf of Pune International Center, we extend our heartfelt gratitude to everyone for attending this book launch. We would like to extend our heartfelt gratitude to Ambassador Lakshmi Puri for joining us today for this joyous occasion. We would also like to extend a heartfelt, sincere thanks to all our panelists, Ms. Anu Agha, Ms. Ika Chaturvedii, Dr. Ajit Ranade, Ms. Vandana Chavan, and Dr. Ganesh Natarajan for the thought-provoking discussion. And a heartfelt gratitude to Dr. Uma Ganesh and Dr. Ganesh Natarajan for their efforts in compiling the book and guiding today's discussions. A special thank you to all the contributors for their outstanding efforts in bringing the book to life. And thank you to all our attendees. Your enthusiasm and involvement have greatly contributed to today's discussion. A special thank you to the backend team for the seamless execution for this event. And I'd also like to bring attention to our next event, which will be in December, which is a lecture on Sufism. So you can find all the details about it on our website. And thank you all for attending our book launch, and we'll end it here. Thank you, sir.